as president, the interesting thing here, at least for what we've talked about before in the past, is that a lot of the things that people were really upset about at the beginning of the 1900s that populists wanted to get taken care of with the People's Party are going to come back now, almost 14 years later, and they're going to emerge as policies of the progressive side of President Wilson now that he's won the election. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that people really wanted to talk about was how can the federal government pay for all of these things that it needs to do to help society? Because our Constitution, when it was initially passed, did not allow for an income tax. Our government in Washington, D.C., could not tax our income. They got taxes from different ways, but not from our income. This needs to change if our government's going to provide services for us to keep us safe, make society better. So the 16th Amendment is passed, and that 16th Amendment is going to allow our government to collect taxes. Now that raises a big question about what kind of tax we should collect, and they settle on something called a graduated tax on income, or a graduated income tax. Here's how it works. It's really pretty simple, and you can see it there where it says a person makes more. A person with a large income is going to pay more in tax than a person with a small income. Now, if you're a visual learner, you kind of need to see that to understand what that means. You can take a look at this little chart, and hopefully this will help you out. So in green are the incomes, and essentially what this is saying is that you make, if you're on the left, less than if you're on the right. So as you're going here, the incomes gradually go up. Graduated, gradual. And as you make more, so the person over here, for example, as they make more over time, slowly the taxes will go up too. A graduated income tax. The more you make, the more you pay in taxes. So like if you were to draw a line over from this person here who makes the most on the right, you drew a line over for his taxes, he pays more in taxes than some people even make in income, like over here on the right. That's designed as a way to keep the system fair. Not equal, but fair. It keeps wealth out of the hands of too few people and puts it in the hands of most Americans. That's the idea anyway. And it definitely targets some of those robber barons and people with outrageous fortunes who are making a ton of money. That graduated income tax definitely targets them. And Wilson also says, it's not enough for the government to collect money. We have to be sure that the money of our average everyday people are safe. Because one of the things that I know you looked at last year were a lot of bank failures, and when banks would just collapse for no reason at all because they weren't very successful or very smart with their money. So I drew a little circle here with green in it, and it says bank, and that represents all the money that a bank has from all of its people that it's deposited. Okay, and you come to your bank, you're supposed to be able to get your money out of there, right? That's how that works. But if the bank makes bad investments, you're going to show up. You say, hey, bank, you got my money? And they don't have it. You don't have my money? What are you talking about? You don't have my money? You don't have my money? Am I going to come over there? You don't have my money. You better get my money, pal, huh? You better get my money. Anyway, the point here I'm saying is that he supports, Wilson supports one of the most important laws in our history. It's called the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. I know it sounds dull and it doesn't do anything crazy revolutionary, but it does protect us in ways that had never been protected before. What it says really clearly is that a bank has to keep some of its money, the part I just did in the red circle for say, in a special Federal Reserve Bank that keeps it safe. So that, heaven help us, if something terrible happens and this whole bank begins to shrink, or something terrible happens and the bank begins to lose its money, oh no, that it still has a reserve it can rely on, that it can call that reserve back and say, hey, reserve, come back from the federal bank. And then all of a sudden, that reserve comes back from the federal bank and they've got a little bit more money and they can keep safe in the long term. That's a really big deal. Keeping part of our money in the Federal Reserve banks gives us a cushion against unexpected losses. The other big thing that Progressive Wilson wants to do is end child labor, but here's the interesting thing. The Supreme Court actually says he can't do that. He can't end child labor because it's not something Congress is allowed to do to tell the states what and who can work in what state and what the rules are in your state, that the government in Washington can't tell your state what your rules are when it comes to citizens of your state working. So it has to be something that we're going to see over time slowly change, where state by state by state by state, they're going to pass child labor laws until almost all the states have them, and then eventually all the states do have them. But it is an attempt. He does pass the Keating-Owen Child Labor Act. He encourages it. He signs it. It is found unconstitutional, but it will at least start the nation moving in the direction of ending child labor in our country, which you might be surprised to find out tomorrow isn't fully gone all the way.